The retired cowboy and the Apache widow, Samuel Sam McCall, had lived most of his life under the wide open skies of New Mexico. The prairie stretched for miles in every direction, golden in the sunlight and rolling gently under the wind. It was quiet here, almost too quiet for someone who had spent decades with the sound of horses' hooves and cattle lowing around him. But Sam had grown used to it. After all, a man who spent 40 years riding across plains, chasing cattle, and living off the land was no stranger to solitude. The old ranch was modest. A wooden house with peeling paint sat near a small barn where Sam kept a few horses. The fences were patched in some places, worn in others, but they held. Sam took pride in that, even though the work was sometimes tiring. Each morning he would rise with the sun, brew strong coffee, and step out onto the porch to watch the horizon. The prairie seemed endless, stretching into mountains that shimmered with heat in summer or gleamed with frost in winter. He liked the calm, liked the peace. But sometimes, in the quiet hours of dawn, he could feel the weight of years and the ache of memories that would not leave him. Sam had never married. Friends had come and gone over the years, some settling down, others lost to the hard life of ranching and travel. He had loved the freedom of the cowboy life, the wind in his hair, the sense of being alive in the saddle, but he had also felt its loneliness. Nights were the hardest. He would sit by the fire, the flickering flames casting shadows on the wooden walls, and remember faces long gone. He missed laughter, missed conversation, missed the warmth of someone caring for him as he had once cared for others. Yet, there was comfort in his routine. Feeding the horses, checking fences, tending a small vegetable garden, all of it kept him grounded, kept him moving forward without dwelling too much on what he lacked. One late afternoon, as Sam walked along the northern fence line, he noticed something unusual. A small cloud of dust rose on the horizon, moving slowly across the prairie. At first he thought it might be a herd of cattle, perhaps strays wandering from a nearby ranch. But the dust moved differently, more steady, deliberate, like someone traveling on horseback. He squinted against the sun and shaded his eyes with one hand. The figure was small, but unmistakable. A rider. Sam's heart beat a little faster. Visitors were rare. Most people in these parts knew the land and the neighbors. Random travelers did not often come this far, and certainly not without reason. He felt a flicker of curiosity, mixed with caution. Life had taught him to be wary, especially after so many years of seeing people come and go, some with kindness, others with trouble. He rested one hand on the fence post and watched as the figure drew closer. The rider turned out to be a woman. She was older, her hair streaked with silver, and she wore a wide-brimmed hat to shield her face from the sun. Her clothes were simple and practical, worn from years of working outdoors, but there was a dignity in the way she sat her horse and held herself. When she reached the fence, she slowed, guiding her horse carefully to the ground. "Afternoon," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Are you Sam McCall?" Sam nodded, unsure if he should greet her warmly or keep his distance. "That's me. And you are?" "Barehanded." "My name is Naomi," she replied. "I live not far from here. I was told you might be able to give me some advice." Sam studied her. There was a weight in her eyes, a quiet sadness, but also strength. He recognized that look. It was the look of someone who had survived hard times and carried them with dignity. He gestured toward the porch. "Well, come on in. We can sit a while." Naomi followed him slowly, her horse tethered nearby. She didn't rush, didn't speak too much. Sam led her into the shade of the porch and offered her a seat on the old wooden bench. For a moment they sat in silence, listening to the wind moving through the grass, the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Finally, Naomi spoke. "I need help with my homestead," she said softly. "My husband passed away last year. I'm trying to manage everything on my own, but it's hard. I was told you know the land well. Maybe you can give me some guidance."
Sam nodded slowly.
He understood all too well the burden of working alone, the endless chores, and the struggle against nature itself. "I've been managing this place for a long time," he said. "It isn't easy, that's for sure. But maybe I can help you, at least with some advice and a few hands when needed." For the next few hours, they spoke quietly, Naomi describing her homestead, the small garden, the few animals she had, and the challenges she faced. Sam listened carefully, asking questions here and there, offering small suggestions. He noticed how carefully she considered his advice, how determined she was not to give up despite the hardship. There was a resilience in her that reminded him of himself at a younger age. As the sun began to dip behind the mountains, Sam invited her to stay for supper. She hesitated at first, but the warmth of the house and the offer of food was comforting. That evening, over simple beans and cornbread, they talked more. Naomi shared stories of her husband, a man who had loved the land and the traditions of their people. Sam shared tales of his cattle drives, of winters so harsh that the wind felt like knives against the skin, of nights around campfires with friends long gone. There was a gentle understanding growing between them, an unspoken connection. They were from different worlds in some ways, yet their lives had been shaped by similar struggles. Hard work, loss, and the constant challenge of living in a land that demanded respect. Sam realized that in Naomi's presence he felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in years, the simple joy of companionship, even without words, even without expectations. That night, as Naomi settled on a small cot in the spare room, Sam stepped outside once more. The prairie was bathed in silver moonlight, the stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. He thought of the dust on the horizon earlier in the day and smiled faintly. Life had a way of bringing unexpected visitors into one's path. Sometimes they brought trouble, sometimes they brought change, and sometimes, just sometimes, they brought a quiet sense of hope. The wind carried the faint scent of sagebrush and wildflowers, a reminder of the land that had shaped him and that still offered lessons, even in old age. Sam returned inside, feeling a little lighter than he had in years. There was work to do, challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while he didn't feel entirely alone. Tomorrow they would continue talking, planning, and learning from one another. And maybe, in this quiet corner of the prairie, a new chapter of life was beginning, one that promised connection, understanding, and the comfort of shared experience. Sam lay awake that night, listening to the soft creak of the house settling and the whisper of the wind outside. He thought of the years behind him, of friends and family long gone, and of the unexpected paths life still had to offer. In Naomi, he saw a reminder that even in later years, there were new stories to be written, new friendships to be formed, and new joys to be discovered. He closed his eyes with a sense of calm, ready to face the days to come, no longer completely alone on the endless prairie he had called home for so long. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the prairie, casting a warm, golden light across the fields and mountains. Samuel McCall had already been up for hours, tending to the horses and checking the fences. The quiet routine of the ranch was comforting. Yet today there was a sense of anticipation in the air. Naomi was still in the house, preparing a simple breakfast of eggs and bread. Sam could hear her humming softly as he stepped out to the barn. Her voice, low and calm, seemed to carry the peaceful rhythm of someone in tune with the land. When breakfast was ready, they sat together at the small wooden table. Naomi had a quiet way of eating, deliberate and thoughtful. Sam watched her, realizing that she carried herself with the strength of someone who had faced loss, yet refused to be defeated. After a few moments of silence, Naomi spoke. "I've been struggling to keep my homestead running," she said. "It's not easy alone. I have a small garden, a few animals, but it never seems enough. I could use guidance, someone with experience to show me the best way to do things." "Ah," Sam nodded slowly, feeling a sense of responsibility awaken in him. "I know what you mean," he replied. "Ranching alone can wear a person down, but it's not impossible. We'll start small, one step at a time. You don't have to do it all alone." After breakfast, Sam led Naomi outside to the barn. He showed her the horses, explaining how to check their hooves, feed them properly, and notice signs of illness. Naomi listened intently, asking questions when needed and trying each task herself. Her hands were steady, her movements careful, but there was a natural confidence in the way she approached the work. Sam realized quickly that she was not someone to be underestimated. Years of living with the land had given her skills, even if they were different from his own. Next, they moved to the vegetable garden. Naomi admitted that her crops had suffered from neglect, with weeds taking over and soil that needed attention. Sam suggested simple ways to improve the soil, rotate the plants, and protect them from pests. Naomi nodded thoughtfully, taking notes and asking for clarification when needed. She shared stories of her mother teaching her to plant, to nurture the soil, and to listen to the seasons. Sam listened carefully, fascinated by the wisdom carried in her words. He realized that while his knowledge came from years of ranching and moving cattle, hers came from generations of living closely with the land in harmony. As the day wore on, the two of them worked side by side. Sam repaired a broken fence post while Naomi gathered firewood and fed the animals. They exchanged stories during brief breaks, speaking of childhood memories of people who had shaped their lives and of the challenges they had faced. Sam learned about Naomi's husband, a man who had loved the mountains and the traditions of his people. Naomi spoke of him with a mixture of sorrow and pride, sharing lessons he had taught her about patience, courage, and respect for the earth.
Sam felt a growing respect for her.
She was not just a widow struggling to survive. She was a woman who carried wisdom, strength, and resilience. Her calm presence reminded him of the friends he had lost, the family he had never started, and the values that had guided his own life. For the first time in many years, he felt a sense of companionship, not romantic or fleeting, but steady and grounding. Naomi had a way of making him feel connected to the world again, even after so many years of solitude. In the late afternoon, they paused to rest under the shade of a large cottonwood tree near the barn. The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers. Sam handed Naomi a canteen of water. She drank slowly, savoring each sip. "Do you ever miss the days of riding with a herd of cattle?" she asked quietly, her eyes thoughtful. Sam smiled faintly. "Every day," he admitted. "There's nothing like the feeling of riding across the plains, feeling the wind, knowing the land under your feet. But it's a hard life, too. It takes its toll. That's why I stay here now. Simpler life, fewer risks. But it's quieter, and sometimes quiet is all you want." Naomi nodded, understanding more than he expected. "I understand," she said softly. "Life teaches you lessons in its own way. Some days are easy, some days are hard. But the land, it always demands respect."
Oh, Sam felt a deep connection with her words. There was a similarity between them, though they came from different backgrounds.
He had always admired people who could work with the land, who understood its rhythms and secrets. Naomi seemed to embody that knowledge, carrying it naturally, without arrogance or show. Over the next few days, their routine continued. Sam would show Naomi small but important ranching techniques: how to mend fences, identify signs of sick animals, or store feed for winter. Naomi, in turn, taught Sam some of the ways her family had survived for generations: identifying edible plants, understanding the movement of animals in the wild, and using natural remedies for minor injuries or sickness. They laughed together when things went wrong, like when a stubborn goat refused to go into the pen, or when a pile of hay tumbled to the ground. But they also celebrated small victories: a fence finally repaired, a plant thriving in the garden, a horse that grew healthier under their care. The work was hard, and the prairie was unforgiving. Hot summer days left them sweaty and tired, while sudden rains made the ground slippery and muddy. Yet, these shared struggles brought them closer. They relied on each other in ways that neither had expected. Sam realized that he felt less alone, and Naomi felt stronger knowing she had someone to guide her. Their friendship was built slowly, quietly, without grand gestures, but with a steady rhythm of shared effort and mutual respect. One evening after a long day of work, they sat on the porch together watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of pink, orange, and purple, reflecting on the quiet prairie. Sam offered Naomi a cup of coffee, and they sat in companionable silence. The air was calm, except for the soft rustling of leaves and the distant call of a hawk returning to its nest. "You know," Naomi said finally, "I wasn't sure about coming here. I didn't know if I could trust anyone after losing him. But now I feel different. Safe, somehow. Not alone." Sam nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in years. "Life has a way of surprising you," he replied. "Even in old age, even when you think the best years are behind you, something or someone can come along and change things." They sat quietly until darkness settled over the prairie. The stars emerged, bright and endless, reflecting the vastness of the land they both loved. Sam felt a deep sense of peace. For the first time in a long while, he looked forward to the days ahead, not with expectation, but with quiet hope. The days turned into weeks, and Naomi became a regular presence at the ranch. She worked alongside Sam, learning and teaching in equal measure. Together they faced small challenges and celebrated small victories. Through their daily efforts a bond grew, not one of romance, but of understanding, respect, and companionship. Each had lived a long, sometimes lonely life, but together they found the comfort of shared purpose. One afternoon, after repairing a particularly difficult section of fence, Sam leaned against a post and wiped sweat from his brow. Naomi stood nearby, brushing dirt from her hands, and smiled. "You know, I think this fence might actually hold now," she said. Sam chuckled. "It's stronger than anything I've built in years. Couldn't have done it without you." "No, Sam. It's you who taught me how to face it. I only followed your lead." They shared a quiet laugh, the kind that comes from companionship and mutual respect. It was in these small moments, amidst hard work and simple conversation, that they realized the true value of friendship. They did not need grand adventures or dramatic gestures. Their bond was built in the quiet rhythm of life, in the understanding of the land, and in the willingness to be there for one another. As evening fell, Sam watched Naomi ride her horse back toward her homestead, the sun casting long shadows across the prairie. He felt a sense of satisfaction and hope. Life, he realized, still had room for connection, for learning, and for growth. He returned to the ranch with a renewed spirit, ready for the challenges ahead, knowing that the days would no longer be entirely solitary. In those quiet moments, Sam understood something important. Life was not only about surviving or enduring. It was about sharing knowledge, supporting others, and finding companionship in unexpected places. Naomi had brought a new chapter into his life, one of trust, friendship, and quiet resilience. And for Sam, that was more valuable than anything he had learned during his years on the prairie. Days turned into weeks, and Samuel McCall and Naomi's routine became a rhythm of the prairie. Their mornings were filled with the tasks of ranch life, feeding horses, checking fences, tending the vegetable garden, and their evenings were spent sharing stories and quiet conversation. It was hard work, but it was also rewarding. The small victories, repairing a fence, a healthy crop, a horse in good health, brought a sense of accomplishment neither had expected. But life on the prairie was never simple. One afternoon, heavy clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and threatening. The wind picked up, carrying a scent of rain and the promise of a storm. Sam noticed the sudden change and frowned. "Looks like a bad one," he said, scanning the sky. "We need to secure everything." Naomi nodded, a determined expression on her face.
"We can do this," she said.
"It's just another challenge." Together they hurried to the barn and began tying down loose equipment, securing the animals in their pens, and checking the fences for weak spots. The storm arrived sooner than expected, with heavy rain and strong winds lashing the prairie. The two of them worked tirelessly, shouting over the roar of the wind to make sure the animals were safe and that nothing was lost. The rain soaked them to the bone. The wind whipped their clothes and hair, and the mud turned the ground into a slippery mess. Yet amidst the chaos, there was a sense of teamwork and understanding. Sam had faced storms like this before, but having Naomi by his side made the work easier, not because it reduced the effort, but because it reminded him that he wasn't facing the challenges alone. Naomi, too, showed resilience and courage. She remained calm, moving quickly to secure a frightened horse or reinforce a fence post. Together, they weathered the storm, and by late evening the rain began to ease, leaving the prairie glistening and fresh. After the storm, they stood outside, breathing in the clean, rain-washed air. Naomi looked at the horizon, the mountains now softened by mist. "The land is alive," she said quietly. "It tests us, but it also rewards us." Sam nodded. "A hard life, yes, but a life worth living," he replied. "And sometimes it reminds you who you are, what you can endure." Their bond deepened not only through shared work but through these moments of challenge. They learned to rely on each other, not out of necessity alone, but out of respect and trust. Sam began to see Naomi not just as a friend or neighbor, but as a teacher. She had knowledge of the land that went beyond ranching, knowledge of nature, the seasons, and the animals that roamed freely. Naomi taught him to recognize subtle signs in the environment, the way birds behave before a storm, the scent of plants that indicated rain, the movement of deer across the fields. Sam, in turn, shared the practical skills he had honed over decades: how to repair fences efficiently, care for sick animals, and manage the land to prevent overwork and erosion. Evenings were often spent around the fire, sipping coffee and exchanging stories. Naomi spoke of her childhood, of life with her family in the mountains, and of her husband, who had taught her patience and strength. Sam shared tales from his youth of cattle drives, of friendships formed on the road, and of nights under the stars, when the world felt endless and free. In these conversations they discovered shared values: respect for the land, the importance of honesty, and the understanding that hard work brought not only survival but pride and dignity. One day a problem arose that tested both their skills and patience. A young colt, newly born and still fragile, had fallen ill. Naomi noticed its weakness early and called Sam for help. Together they worked to stabilize the animal, making a temporary shelter, feeding it carefully, and monitoring its condition. Sam had seen sick animals before, but Naomi's calm attention to detail and her gentle care made the difference. Days of worry followed, but gradually the colt grew stronger, able to stand on its own and eventually run across the pasture. The relief they shared was quiet but profound, a reminder of what could be achieved through patience, knowledge, and teamwork. Through such experiences, both Sam and Naomi learned more than practical skills. They learned lessons about humility and resilience, about facing fear without letting it control them, and about finding joy in small victories. Sam realized that life, even after years of solitude, still offered opportunities to grow and to connect. Naomi realized that trust and collaboration could ease burdens and create bonds that were more valuable than she had imagined. The prairie itself became a teacher for them both. They observed the cycles of the land, how drought could threaten crops but also teach careful management, how the animals adapted to changing seasons, and how even the harshest weather carried lessons in patience and preparation. Sam had always known the land in a practical sense, but Naomi's perspective, informed by her heritage and lifelong observation, showed him a deeper understanding. The land was alive, and survival required not just strength, but attentiveness and respect. One afternoon, as they repaired a section of fence damaged by a fallen tree, Naomi paused and looked across the prairie. "Do you ever wonder," she asked quietly, "why life brings people together at certain times? We might have lived our whole lives apart, but here we are, working side by side."
Sam considered her question, leaning on his tool.
"I think life has a way of teaching us, even in old age. Sometimes it's through challenges, sometimes through friendship. I don't know why, exactly, but I'm grateful for it." Naomi smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "Me too." Their bond, though never spoken of in grand terms, was deepening in subtle ways. They relied on each other for practical help, yes, but also for emotional support. Both had experienced loss and loneliness, and both found comfort in the shared understanding of a quiet, steady presence. They could work together in silence, knowing the other understood without needing words. And when they spoke, their conversations carried a weight of honesty and reflection that few others could match. As the seasons shifted, the prairie tested them in new ways. Summer heat scorched the fields, requiring early mornings and late evenings to care for the animals and crops. Autumn winds tore through the plains, scattering leaves and challenging fences. Yet each challenge brought growth, resilience, and deeper trust. Sam and Naomi learned to anticipate problems, plan carefully, and support each other when fatigue or worry threatened to take hold. One evening, after a long day of repairing a water trough and reinforcing the barn, they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The sky was painted in brilliant colors, reflecting the beauty and harshness of the land they called home. Naomi sighed softly. "It's not easy, but I feel stronger," she said. "I couldn't have done this alone." Sam nodded, a rare smile on his face. "And I've learned a lot from you," he admitted. "Not just about the land, but about patience, about seeing things in ways I didn't before. You've taught me more than you know." Their days continued in this rhythm: work, conversation, learning, and quiet reflection. They faced storms, illness, and exhaustion, but also moments of joy, laughter, and achievement. Through shared struggles, their bond strengthened, built not on necessity alone, but on mutual respect and understanding. Sam began to realize that he was no longer just a retired cowboy living in solitude. He was part of a partnership, in a sense, not romantic, but deeply human. Naomi brought knowledge, wisdom, and strength. He brought experience, guidance, and steady support. Together they were stronger than either had been alone, and both understood that this bond, formed quietly through labor, learning, and mutual respect, was rare and precious. By the time autumn settled over the prairie, painting the grasses in shades of amber and gold, Sam and Naomi had achieved more than just a well-run ranch. They had formed a connection that brought meaning and comfort to their lives. Life was still hard, still demanding, but it was also filled with quiet triumphs, laughter, and shared understanding. They faced challenges together, and in doing so they discovered the simple truth that companionship, patience, and mutual respect could create something lasting and valuable, even in later years. By the time winter approached, Samuel McCall and Naomi had grown accustomed to their shared routine. The prairie, once vibrant with summer golds and autumn ambers, now lay under a blanket of frost, the wind biting at exposed skin and the earth hard beneath their boots. Despite the harshness of the season, they faced it with quiet determination, having built a partnership of trust and mutual respect. Their work continued with the same rhythm: feeding animals, maintaining fences, and caring for the small vegetable garden that had surprisingly thrived under their joint efforts. But as their bond deepened, the presence of the two neighbors together did not go unnoticed in the nearby town. At first, locals whispered and speculated. A retired cowboy and an Apache widow working side by side was unusual, and some older residents were wary, influenced by old prejudices and outdated ideas about different communities living in close friendship. Sam and Naomi heard little of the whispers directly, but they felt the occasional cold glance or cautious nod when venturing into town for supplies. Rather than letting these small judgments affect them, Sam and Naomi focused on action. They believed that respect was earned through deeds, not words. They began helping other ranchers and homesteaders who struggled, offering guidance, lending hands during harvest, and sharing knowledge that benefited the community as a whole. Sam's experience in cattle drives and farm management was invaluable, while Naomi's deep understanding of the land and traditional ways proved equally useful. Their combined skills made them a quiet force for good, and slowly their reputation began to shift. One particular instance marked a turning point. A young family living on the outskirts of the town faced difficulties with a herd of cattle that had strayed into marshy ground. The father was inexperienced, and the mother feared for the children's safety. Sam and Naomi arrived early in the morning, arriving on horseback with calm determination. Together they guided the animals to safety, repaired broken fencing, and taught the family techniques to prevent a recurrence. By the end of the day, the family's gratitude was visible in tears, handshakes, and heartfelt words of thanks. Word of the duo's efforts traveled quickly through the community, and slowly, suspicion gave way to respect. Sam noticed the change as he visited the local general store. People nodded with genuine warmth, offered small talk, and even asked for advice on issues ranging from cattle care to garden planting. Naomi, who initially preferred to keep her distance, also began engaging more openly. She shared small lessons from her heritage, showing neighbors how to use natural remedies for minor ailments, how to conserve water efficiently, and how to work with the seasons rather than against them. The townspeople, seeing the practical benefits of these lessons, gradually embraced her presence. It was during this time that Sam and Naomi decided to organize a small gathering to celebrate both cowboy and Apache traditions. They invited neighbors to the ranch, setting up areas for cooking, storytelling, and demonstrations. Sam brought old cowboy songs, tales of cattle drives, and simple games that had entertained ranch hands for generations. Naomi introduced the group to traditional Apache practices, ways to read the land, use herbs for healing, and tell stories that carried lessons of courage and respect. The event was more successful than either had anticipated. Children laughed and ran between the different stations, learning the skills of both worlds. Adults listened intently to the stories and found joy in shared laughter and understanding. For Sam, seeing the two worlds come together without conflict was profoundly moving. Naomi's quiet wisdom and steady presence had earned the respect of the community, and he realized that friendship and knowledge could bridge even the oldest divides. Over the following months, their influence grew subtly but steadily. Neighbors began visiting more often, not only for advice but for companionship. Sam and Naomi found themselves offering shelter during storms, lending tools, or teaching children about the land. The ranch became a hub of quiet activity, a place where knowledge was shared and traditions preserved. People of all ages began to see that strength did not lie in isolation but in collaboration and respect for one another. Through these experiences, Sam and Naomi also reflected on their own pasts. Sam thought about the friends he had lost, the years spent on the road, and the solitude he had come to accept. Naomi thought about her husband, who had taught her the value of patience and care, and the challenges she had faced since his passing. Together, they discovered that their friendship was not just about work. It was about healing, learning, and sharing the burdens and joys of life. Each had grown stronger, wiser, and more connected to the land and the people around them. The community began to see the practical benefits of their combined knowledge. Fields that had once struggled to yield crops were thriving under the careful guidance of Sam and Naomi. Animals that had previously been neglected or mismanaged were healthier, and younger ranchers were learning skills that would help them sustain their farms for years to come. The lessons of the land, passed down through generations and now shared openly, became a source of unity. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the frost-covered prairie, a neighbor approached the ranch with a request. "We've never had a storm like last winter," he said. "Many of us struggled, but your advice helped us survive. Could you teach us more about preparation and planning?" Sam looked at Naomi, who nodded with quiet determination.
"Of course," he said. "We'll show you what we know."
It's all about respect for the land and working together. Over the next few weeks, they held small gatherings for local ranchers and homesteaders, demonstrating techniques for storing supplies, protecting animals, and preparing gardens for harsh conditions. Naomi shared herbal remedies, ways to identify animal tracks, and signs that indicated changes in weather. Sam taught practical skills from fence repair to animal care, ensuring that the lessons were useful and easy to follow. Through these efforts, Sam and Naomi became a symbol of quiet leadership. They did not seek recognition or praise, but their actions spoke louder than words. The community learned not only practical skills, but also the values that Sam and Naomi embodied: patience, resilience, respect, and cooperation. Their partnership showed that strength came from understanding and supporting each other, regardless of background or history. Even as their influence grew, Sam and Naomi remained humble. They continued their daily work with the same care as before, always learning, always adapting. They found joy in the small successes: a repaired fence, a healthy crop, a neighbor smiling with relief after a lesson learned. These moments reminded them that life was built on simple, meaningful acts, and that the bonds formed through shared effort were often the strongest. Through the harshness of winter and the beauty of early spring, Sam and Naomi's friendship remained steady. The community began to trust and rely on them, and slowly old prejudices faded. Children grew up hearing the stories of the retired cowboy and the Apache widow, learning lessons of courage, respect, and unity. Adults found inspiration in their partnership, realizing that cooperation and mutual understanding were far more powerful than isolation or division. In quiet moments, Sam often reflected on the journey that had brought them here. He remembered the loneliness of his early retirement, the endless prairie that had once felt too vast, too empty. Now, with Naomi by his side and the community growing stronger, he felt a sense of purpose he had not known for many years. Naomi, too, found solace in the connection they had built. Her grief over her husband's passing had softened, replaced by hope, friendship, and a renewed sense of belonging. Together they created a small but meaningful legacy. The ranch was no longer just a home for two individuals. It was a place of learning, collaboration, and shared respect. They had bridged gaps between people, between cultures, and between generations. Their story was not one of grand heroics or dramatic events, but of steady, persistent effort, of kindness and wisdom applied in daily life. And as the prairie stretched endlessly beneath the setting sun, Sam and Naomi knew that the work they had done went beyond fences, gardens, or animals. They had built a community of trust and respect, showing that even in later years, one could still make a difference. Through their actions, they taught that friendship, shared knowledge, and compassion were the most valuable lessons anyone could offer. The quiet of the prairie no longer felt empty. It was filled with the laughter of children, the chatter of neighbors, and the sense of connection that comes from shared effort and mutual respect. Sam and Naomi had discovered that life's most meaningful achievements were often the simplest: helping others, learning from one another, and building bonds that could last for generations. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Sam and Naomi stood side by side, looking out over the prairie. The land, harsh yet beautiful, had tested them, shaped them, and ultimately brought them together. In the quiet strength of their partnership, they found not only friendship, but a purpose that extended far beyond their own lives, a legacy of wisdom, resilience, and unity that would endure in the community for years to come. Years passed, and the seasons on the prairie continued their quiet rhythm. Samuel McCall and Naomi had grown older, their hair streaked with silver, and their faces marked with the lines of experience. Yet their spirits remained strong, tempered by decades of hard work, resilience, and the companionship they had built together. The ranch was thriving. Livestock grazed peacefully, fences stood firm, and the garden Naomi had nurtured now provided a bounty of vegetables and herbs. The land had become more than a home. It was a symbol of their dedication, knowledge, and shared effort. Though age had slowed their pace, it had not diminished their purpose. Every morning they walked among the animals, checking for health and comfort. They repaired fences with steady hands, worked in the garden, and maintained the barn with care. But their work was no longer just for themselves. The ranch had become a center of learning, a place where neighbors, young and old, came to seek advice, guidance, or simply to spend time in their company. Sam and Naomi had become mentors, passing on knowledge that spanned generations. One crisp winter morning, Sam noticed Naomi tending to a row of herbs with meticulous care. He approached her, leaning lightly on his walking stick. "You've done wonders here," he said. "These plants are thriving like never before." "The land responds when you respect it," she said. "I've learned a lot from you, Sam." Together, we've done more than I ever imagined. It was a quiet moment of reflection, but for Sam it was profound. He realized that their combined efforts had created something enduring, a legacy not measured in wealth or fame, but in life, knowledge, and shared purpose. As time went on, Sam's health began to decline. The years of hard work, once invigorating, now weighed heavily on his body. He moved more slowly, and some tasks that had once been routine now required effort that left him exhausted. Naomi, aware of his condition, took on more of the physical work, while Sam offered guidance and encouragement. Their partnership had evolved, and the roles they played were balanced by care and understanding rather than necessity alone. One winter evening, Sam sat in his favorite chair by the fire, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. Naomi prepared tea in the kitchen, the warm aroma filling the small house. Sam looked out the window at the prairie, now blanketed in snow, and thought about the life he had lived. The years of riding cattle, the long days on the open plains, the quiet years of solitude, all had led to this moment. And yet, he felt content. He had lived fully, learned from the land, and discovered companionship that had brought meaning to his later years. Naomi joined him with 2 steaming cups of tea and sat across from him. She did not speak immediately, instead letting the warmth of the fire fill the room. Finally, she said softly, "Sam, the work we've done here, it will live on, not just in the land, but in the people we've helped, in the lessons we've shared." Sam nodded, sipping his tea. "I hope so," he replied. "I want to leave something meaningful behind, something that reminds others that life is better when you care, when you teach, when you share." As the days passed, Sam's condition gradually worsened, though he remained alert and engaged. Naomi was by his side constantly, caring for him with patience and dedication. She tended to the animals, managed the garden, and ensured the ranch ran smoothly, all while offering comfort and companionship. Sam, in turn, shared stories of his youth, his travels, and the lessons he had learned over decades. Their conversations became more reflective, filled with wisdom and gentle humor, a testament to the deep bond they had forged. One morning, as the sun rose over the frost-covered prairie, Sam and Naomi walked together to the barn. The horses greeted them, nuzzling gently as they passed. Sam leaned on Naomi's arm for support, and together they inspected the fences, checked the water troughs, and ensured the animals were comfortable. It was a peaceful routine, filled with quiet satisfaction. Later that day, Sam asked Naomi to sit with him on the porch. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of pine and sage across the frozen prairie. Sam looked at Naomi with a calm expression. "I've lived a long life," he said, "and I've learned many things. But the most important lesson is this: kindness, patience, and friendship matter more than anything else. You've reminded me of that, Naomi. You've made my later years meaningful." Naomi's eyes glistened with quiet emotion. "And you've reminded me that even in grief, life can offer hope," she replied. "We've built something together, Sam, something that will last beyond us." In the days that followed, Sam grew weaker. Naomi cared for him with unwavering attention, ensuring he was warm, comfortable, and surrounded by familiar sights and sounds. She spoke to him softly, recounting shared memories, laughing at small jokes and offering reassurance. The bond between them had deepened into something that transcended words, a quiet understanding that they had shared a life rich in experience, knowledge, and companionship. One winter evening, as the prairie lay under a thick layer of snow and the wind whispered through the trees, Sam passed away peacefully in his sleep. Naomi found him the next morning, a gentle smile on his face and the fire from the night before still warm in the hearth. Though grief settled heavily on her heart, she felt a profound sense of peace. Sam had lived fully, loved the land, and found companionship in his final years. Naomi tended to the ranch with a renewed purpose. She continued caring for the animals, maintaining the garden, and guiding neighbors and children who sought her wisdom. She shared stories of Sam, recounting his lessons, his humor, and his dedication to the land. In doing so, she ensured that his legacy endured, not just in the land he had loved, but in the lives of everyone who had learned from him. The community, inspired by the partnership of Sam and Naomi, continued to honor their memory. Children who had grown up visiting the ranch learned not only practical skills but also the values that Sam and Naomi had exemplified: respect, patience, resilience, and the importance of helping others. Adults carried forward the lessons of cooperation and understanding, recognizing the quiet strength in their actions. As years passed, Naomi grew older, but the ranch remained a place of life, learning, and connection. Outside work. She often stood on the porch at sunset, looking across the prairie where Sam had spent his final years. The wind carried memories of shared work, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. Naomi could feel his presence in the rhythm of the land, in the sound of horses moving through the fields, and in the stories she told to children and neighbors alike. The ranch, once the home of a solitary retired cowboy, had transformed into a place of legacy, Sam's wisdom and Naomi's knowledge combined to create something enduring, a symbol of friendship, resilience, and quiet strength. Through their lives, they had shown that meaningful relationships could form in unexpected places, that respect and understanding could bridge generations and cultures, and that the land itself could teach lessons of patience, care, and harmony. In the final years of her life, Naomi often reflected on the journey she had shared with Sam. Though he was no longer physically present, his influence remained in every corner of the ranch, in the health of the animals, the flourishing garden, and the community they had touched. She knew that the legacy they had created together would endure, carried forward in the hearts and minds of those who had learned from their example. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the prairie, Naomi stood on the porch, breathing in the crisp air. She closed her eyes and smiled, feeling the presence of her friend, mentor, and companion. Sam's lessons, his humor, and his quiet strength were with her still, a reminder that life's true value was found not in wealth or fame, but in the connections we build, the knowledge we share, and the kindness we extend to others. And so the prairie remained, a land of vast skies, gentle winds, and endless horizons. It carried the memory of a retired cowboy and an Apache widow who had found companionship, purpose, and legacy in one another. Their story, simple yet profound, became a symbol of enduring friendship, shared wisdom, and the quiet power of living with respect to patience and love. The ranch continued to thrive under Naomi's care, a living testament to a life well lived and a friendship that had changed both their lives. Visitors continued to come, learning lessons of the land, of cooperation, and of resilience. And as the sun set each evening over the prairie, Naomi would smile, knowing that the spirit of Sam McCall remained alive in the work they had done together, the lives they had touched, and the legacy that would endure for generations.